So it's at this point that I'd like to invite our panelists to come up for the Art of Networking. We are a little bit ahead of schedule currently, which is great, which means we get more time to talk with everyone.
Do you have an order for us?
Doesn't matter. And as they're coming up, I'll start with introducing. Now, I have to say the reason you all have a speaker's packet is because the individuals who are up on the stage have done a lot and are extremely skilled as with the rest of our experts, and so can't go through and introduce quite everything, but first off, I'd like to introduce Dr. Lauren Easterling, who is the Director of Trainee Services at Indiana University School of Medicine, and she manages the Career and Professional Development Program for graduate students and postdocs, which is a position she's had for almost 8 years. And Lauren is also a clinical assistant professor in the Department of Anatomy, Cell Biology, and Physiology, and teaches courses that are designed to prepare graduate students for future faculty teaching roles in the life sciences. And she is actually the president-elect of the Graduate Career Consortium, which is a national nonprofit organization of graduate student and postdoc career and professional development professionals. And she is actually a native of Northeast Ohio, so we welcome her back. We're really glad to have you back in the area. And second on our panel, we have Dr. Melissa Bostrom, who is the Assistant Dean for Graduate Student Professional Development at Duke University. And her 16 years in the field of graduate student professional development, as she says, builds on the experiences that she has had as an assistant professor of management communication at University of North Carolina's Keenan Flager Business School, working in corporate human resources and technical recruiting and teaching English writing and literature classes. She's been invited speaker for multiple societies and is co-PI on the Duke Options Project and a number of other professional development programs, which is really exciting. And Melissa currently serves as the Professional Development Officer for the Graduate Career Consortium and is a leading voice in graduate level career and professional development. And she received her master's and PhD in English from University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and her bachelor's in English writing and psychology from Denison University. Third on our panel is Dr. Arnab China, who is an R&D senior scientist at Charisma Therapeutics and oversees the development and validation of analytical methods for the company's innovative immunotherapies for solid tumors. His PhD is in microbiology and cell biology from the Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore, and he actually received his postdoctoral training from the Lerner Research Institute right across the street at the Cleveland Clinic, and actually in the Department of Cardiovascular and Metabolic Sciences. And he is passionate about applying his skills and knowledge to advance the field of cell and gene therapy and improve the lives of patients with unmet medical needs. But he is also the CEO of a nonprofit organization known as STEM Peers, which is actually registered as a PhD career support group in the United States. And the organization helps graduate students, postdocs, and industry professionals with career development and networking by providing peer-to-peer mentoring and support with its over 21,000 plus network of STEM scientists, which is fantastic. And our fourth panelist is Melanie Cinch, who is currently the Director of Career and Professional Development for the Office of Graduate and Postdoctoral Affairs at the University of Virginia. And in this role, she assists all graduate students and postdocs with the career development process, helping them to build skills and achieve their career goals. And she's held a number of roles at a number of really fantastic institutions prior to her current role. But one thing that we really want to note is that she is also the author of Next Gen PhD, A Guide to Career Paths in Science, that was published by Harvard University Press in 2016. And she's done a lot of work with her book and with developing these programs. And in fact, we actually use it here now in the courses at CASE as well. So we're really excited to have Melanie with us. And she actually received her bachelor's degree from Colgate and graduate degrees from University of Michigan and North Carolina State. And she's a nationally certified counselor with a career development focus. And last but certainly not least is Annie Maxfield, who has been helping doctoral students and scholars pursue their career of choice for more than 13 years at Duke, UCLA, and now serves as the Director of Advanced Degree Career and Professional Development at UT Austin. And she is actually the past president of the Graduate Career Consortium and is one of 3 lead creators of Imagine PhD. She grew national employer education and recruitment for doctoral students by establishing the Virtual Masters and PhD Career Expo, and her work with Connected Academics and the American Historical Association to support initiatives such as faculty training, Humanists at Work, and the MLA Doctoral Student Career Planning Guide. So thank you all for joining us today. We're so excited to have you with us. And at this point, we'll actually move into our panel discussion. So, as we get started here, certainly one of the questions I think on a lot of our trainees' minds, our graduate students, our postdocs, some have come from a variety of backgrounds, some that have only been in academia, others that have spent a little bit of time in industry, and some that just have really never had to network in a normal setting, outside of, school, a classroom, and professors. So, the question I think that's really helpful to start off with, and we can go down the line if we'd like to start that way, but for those that do not have very much experience, what do you think is often the most difficult aspect of networking, and what are some thoughts on how to make it easier?
Of course, can you hear me? Mm-hmm. Okay. So, of course, I sat first, which should have meant I should have sat at the far end. But the most difficult part of networking, I have a million answers, but the one I'll give you right now is when I talk with students and postdocs at IU about, especially when they're starting to try to network with people, in the end, we have a conversation where they're like, well, what if I can't get the person to talk? And when I've talked with my postdocs and students, I've encouraged them, like, at our core, even the most introverted people, we do tend to like to talk about what we love. What we love to do, what excites us. That is generally a core human trait. We get excited about things, and we get excited about our work or what we are doing, especially when it is meaning to us, professionally, personally. And my advice is, and yes, there's a lot more steps to this, and my colleagues will talk about that, but if you're feeling nervous or uncomfortable when trying to start a conversation with someone, because that's what networking is, a series of conversations with people. Maybe you start with getting people to talk about themselves. Like, what do you do? What's your favorite type of project? What's the most exciting work you've done? What is something you're proud of in your job? And that can be an in to then a greater conversation beyond just having them say something they love. That can be an easy way to at least get the conversation going.
So to build on Lauren's excellent foundation, at Duke, one of the things that we're kind of trying to reframe when people hear the word networking among trainees, they tend to cower in fear and loathing, I think, is my experience. And I see some nods and smiles, so I think I'm not off base with this audience too, right? But instead, we're trying to reframe it as conversations with helpful humans, right? Because the person on the other side is a human being, just like Lauren said, right? They have interests, they have connections that could be helpful to you, and also you have connections and information that may be helpful to them. I think some of us dread networking because we see it as a one-way street. We need to get something from this other person, when in fact, it's building a relationship, it's sharing information between you, and thinking about all that you have to offer as trainees, doing cutting edge research, think about the fact that once folks step away from that educational environment, they don't have access to that same information. They don't get to read all the papers you get to read. You have something to offer in that conversation as well. So don't sell yourself short.
So thank you, Melissa. To pick up on something that Melissa mentioned, I wanted to focus on that word relationship. I think that is at the core of networking, and it's so important to recognize that it is a two-way street, that you might have information that would be helpful for the person you're talking with. If you're connecting with someone in industry and you're working on a particular project, they may be interested in your work, or if you see a paper that you think would help them with their work, you can share it. So it's really, I think, an important key to remember. I wanted to ask you quickly, how many of you have been to a scientific conference or a conference of any kind? Okay, just about everybody. I am an extreme extrovert, I can tell you that right now, and it's hard for me to approach people that I don't know. It's hard to break into conversations. And so if you do feel that you're more introverted and it's tougher for you to talk with people face to face, you can also start online. So I have reached out to strangers, total strangers on LinkedIn to assist the graduate students and postdocs that I work with, just because they work in a particular field that the graduate student or postdoc is interested in. And people are so happy, willing to talk. If you can get in touch with them, if you can connect with them on LinkedIn, or if you can find an email for them, it's really an easy way to introduce yourself. And then, as Melissa said, to ask about their work. Lauren said, to ask about their work, to express an interest in what they're studying, and that will get the conversation going, so you'll ultimately talk about yourself. So that's another way you can network.
Thank you. Awesome comments, and I would like to add few things. I think I am the case study for all these cases. I am a recent postdoc, and I have been through all these things. When I started my postdoc journey, I am from a different country, different culture. Networking was the favorite thing to me. I didn't do it well, though I was a extrovert. I am an extrovert, but it was very difficult for me. Several things helped me slowly getting into networking events. One thing really helped me was the institutional supports. I remember Tessie and I sitting there in the back, and she used to run a biomedical entrepreneurship club, and back in those days, and I started going to those events, and that helped me getting familiarized with the people, the faces, started talking to people, and really I opened up, learned the tricks of the networking. So seeing familiar faces is really important when you are looking to a network. Take a friend who is part of that networking event or the group and go with him or her, and then get used to the process. But one thing I'll add, things have really changed in last 2-3 years post-pandemic. And when I started my job search, the networking events in person were non-existent. And I would say that LinkedIn networking and my alumni network group, they have done wonders. And actually, it might help someone who is introvert, not that open to talking to others. You are still sitting behind a computer, sending LinkedIn messages and trying to connect, and then getting into a phone call, and it grows exponentially from there. So things have changed recently, and it has done a lot of good for people like me, who was not that open to network. So the world has changed, and it is changing for good.
Okay, so I'm going to go in a different direction. I agree with everything they said. I hate the word networking, like actually despise it. But I think that the two common misconceptions I see are, number one, you think it's an opportunity to pitch yourself. And so I think you tend to focus too much on what you're going to say about yourself. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't know how you want to communicate about yourself when you go to one of these events. But really, it's about making a connection with people. I think the other thing is, like, a lot of times you think you're just expected to know how to do it, and it's a skill you have to develop over time through practice. And so I guess one of my favorite things to say is go to some low stakes, not intense kind of conferences, right? Like, go to a panel and then just talk to a few people after the panel. Also, don't assume you have to talk to the most important person in the room, right? Sometimes just talking to somebody you know and building some confidence right at the beginning helps your confidence throughout an event. And so I guess those are like my big tips, excuse me.
Thank you so much. That is some fantastic insight. And I think to kind of jump in and maybe delve a little bit deeper into, some of these ideas, I guess kind of going a little bit off of what you just mentioned now, Annie, we hear a lot about emotional intelligence. And we hear a lot about, how do I develop emotional intelligence? I don't know how to read people. I mean, what are some strategies, or we talk about practicing, but what's something that, our trainees could do either by themselves or that they could, work to put themselves out there that can really help to develop that emotional intelligence?
So I guess one of the, I don't know. No, I'm kidding.
You didn't think we were going to make this easy for you, did you?
No, I'm like, dang it, why do we start with me? I think one of the biggest things is learning how to mirror people. I think that's one of the biggest pieces. And just paying attention, like, I'll talk about this a little bit more in my workshop, but like if somebody is kind of stepping away from you, like don't follow them, right? Just learning how to kind of mirror them and pick up on some of their cues. If they're not making a ton of eye contact, it might be time to excuse yourself from the conversation. I think those are some of the things that can really help to begin with. And I bet people have a lot better answers than me.
Yeah, if anyone else wants to jump in.
I would add one thing, that when you are going into an event, we tend to go with a lot of expectations that we have to connect to the most important person who's there, who is more has the most networked. I need to go and talk to that person. My initial thought was that don't go with any expectation. Just go as much open mind as possible. If you go with a too much expectation, it creates too much pressure on yourself, and you tend to not read people. I totally agree with her that if you think that someone is not willing to engage, don't push that. Try to look for friendly faces. And there are, like, I would say in an event, 50% of people who are extroverts, 50% of people are introverts. Look for people who are extrovert. It is easy to understand. There will be, like, people like me will be more talkative, smiling, looking around, and they're easy to approach. And when I am going to a networking event, not me, I think most of the people, they are going into an open mind. They are going to meet people, talk to people, and I don't think you will just put off anyone that, okay, why that person is coming and talking to me. It is okay to approach, okay to talk, smile, ask about themselves, ask about what they do, introduce yourself. If you see that conversation is not going to its next phase, you will realize immediately, okay, probably the person is not interested in taking it forward. Move on. There will be another group of people.
So I think, first of all, Annie, I liked your answer. So,
Thank you.
So I would say one of the aspects that you can develop now in your lab group, in your department, with your peers, is active listening. So my graduate degree is actually in counseling, and for one of our counseling classes, we had to sit face to face with another person and look them in the eyes and be silent for 5 minutes. And I don't know if you know how long 5 minutes can be. But that was one of the hardest things we ever had to do. That was one of the hardest things we ever had to do. But when you're listening actively, you're not just waiting to talk, right? You are listening to what the other person says, and you can draw on some connections that you might have, or they may say something that reminds you of another project that you've heard of, or another meeting that you're going to. So really be paying attention to what the other person is saying, and I think that will help the conversation to continue, and it will eventually likely come around back to you and your work. So really try to listen actively.
That's excellent. And just two kind of pieces that I think really feed into Melanie's point here. I think sometimes when we're preparing for these networking sessions, and I highly encourage you to go to Annie's networking workshop that she's doing in one of the breakouts, right? We maybe come in with a pitch prepared and we've got to say the whole thing, right? Because we prepared it and we practiced it and it's 3 minutes long and so we have to say it, right? But that's not actually the truth. And as Melanie just brought up, looking at someone quietly for 3 minutes while they go through their pitch is actually kind of awkward and uncomfortable. So sharing information about yourself in smaller chunks gives the other person an opportunity to ask you a question. Conversely, it gives you the chance to ask them questions when you're actively listening, right? And so one of my favorite ways to engage a conversation at a networking context is in the food and beverage line. Oh, did you try the shrimp? They're so good, right? It's just a question about being a fellow human, right? But then you can strike up a conversation based on that, right? It doesn't have to be about professional matters. Other people are also desperately looking for some topic of conversation to engage, right? In a room full of strangers. So be the hero. Ask a question that's just part of being human, and then listen to that answer.
So listen to everything my colleagues just said. I'm going to go on a slight, because my undergrad was in math, some of you will get, instead of a tangent, let's go on a secant. Yeah, sorry, math humor. But I will say, thinking about this idea of emotional intelligence and networking, and going not way back, but back to Annie's answer about people backing away, but then also my colleagues talking about listening. And Melanie, you stole my thing about listening, but listen to her on that. I actually go the direction, especially when people have a lot of emotion around networking, that when I work one-on-one with our trainees, I'll encourage them in a direction of emotional intelligence with other people starts with yourself. And it starts with, I'm not saying you have to do a ton of self-reflection, a ton of journaling or meditation, but let me give an example of myself. I didn't realize for so long now I know I'm basically super transparent. People can look at me and say, yeah, she's feeling this, this, and that. And that has, for a long time, earlier in my career, it was a hindrance because people would just see, like, I'm ready to answer. I'm ready to jump. And a lot of that was I didn't fully process what I was feeling going into the situation. I'm not trying to be an armchair psychologist here or therapist, but if you think you feel anxious, take time to process what you're feeling. If you've got a therapist, I highly recommend therapists. I've had multiple in my life. And talk to your therapist, talk to a trusted leader, talk to a trusted personal counselor, spiritual counselor, and process what you're feeling about your anxiety, your fear, your worry, whatever it may be. Because I've also been in conversations and meetings with people who are trying to network with me or connect with me. And I can see that they're not listening. I can see that they're processing a lot of their own feelings while I'm wanting to have a conversation with them. So I bring this up because when we're in a networking situation, if we're just all in our head when someone's trying to actually share advice with us or tell their career story or give us guidance, we're not going to receive it well. And that connection could be potentially jeopardized. So that's the approach I take around emotional intelligence, is to use the simple phrase, do your work. Do your work all the time, but especially before you go into networking situations, so that when you're there, you're not seen as like the foot tapper, like I'm just waiting for you to finish to jump in because I've got a really strong opinion on this. So I'll stop now.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's some excellent insight. And I think, as we're thinking about having that emotional intelligence moving into these networking sessions, I think what's maybe worth to think about is that there's different types of networking situations you can be in. Some that are formal, some that are informal. You can be in an event that you're suddenly invited to an interview, something like that. How does it vary being in one of those informal settings versus being in a really formal, you're expected to be in an interview with these? What do you think are the key things to consider of how to prepare yourself for those differences or similarities?
Can I please take a pass and come back to this one?
No, that's fine.
I can start. Yeah.
Okay.
So most of my networking connections I made during my informal situations. Even when I go for a conference, when I used to go during my grad school or postdoc days, I met a lot of networks during the dinner, during the coffee break, when we are not expected to talk about science. I would say now, even in my professional settings, when I talk to others, 70 to 90% of the cases, the conversation starts with either sports, either food, either weather, everything. From there, it goes to my professional direction. So informal settings are the best because you are not in a very you're more open. You are not expected to talk about your professional work, and you make better connections during those informal settings. And I would encourage everybody, look for those kind of situations when you went to the conference, going to the coffee break, find out somebody, talk about anything. Don't have to pitch your science, don't have to pitch your work immediately. Start an informal conversation about how beautiful that Colorado resort is when you went for a conference there, and start from there. It leads to a lot of other meaningful conversations. Then you start talking about your work and who knows, future other networking opportunities.
Okay, I have a little answer. So when I think about formal networking situations, I think it's important to go into those and not assume that you only have to talk about your science. So I do think people still want to talk about what they just learned in the last session or what's going on, so it can be context specific. I guess the way I differentiate between the two is formal, you want to do some research before you get there and determine how you want to spend your time and what some of your goals might be to set yourself up. Like email a couple people ahead of time that you really want to meet with and try to set time aside. Because I know y'all have been at the conference where there's like one professor and like 15 people around that professor and you're like, how do I break in? Right? And really that's not networking, that's them having like a short lecture, like a small group lecture, which I don't know how much they love that too, to be honest with you. And so I think that's how I differentiate, is like your level of preparation, your goals, and how you want to spend your time, because your time is so valuable that it's not a great use of time just going and not connecting or not following up from it. So I think that's how I differentiate.
I would just say, in a formal networking situation, hopefully at this stage of your training, you have the chance to go with a research mentor, supervisor, PI, who can help make those introductions and model that behavior. And if you get that chance, I would take it 100%. Maybe there's a more senior postdoc in your lab, somebody who can help facilitate those introductions so you can see how it goes once before you have to do it solo. So I would take that chance if you can get it.
So, okay, if I jump back in. All right, so by the way, I also modeled what I had just said on the previous question about sometimes you have to take a minute for your own work. And I did that briefly because this is a topic I have a lot of opinions on. And formal versus informal. I mean, there is a difference where I agree with everything everyone has said, but when we come to informal, I can't help but come at it from an equity standpoint. And this idea of sometimes informally, like at a conference, people will gather together in like categories. And sometimes crossing those boundaries in what could almost be by some seen as a socially transgressive way, where you move from where you think you should gravitate, like people like you, to another group of people who you see differences in, but you still accept, but for different reasons, your identity, your experience of the world makes you feel like, am I welcome? Am I wanted? And I tend to take more of an approach of, if you feel comfortable and you feel safe reaching across to say like, oh, can I join you at this restaurant after the conference? Or okay, if I tag along, even if you're not necessarily part of the same group, then I feel do it. And I encourage it. But I also want to acknowledge those in this room who may feel hesitation, like, will they accept me? I say this from doing a lot of work with our LGBTQ plus students and postdocs at IU. And I say this as a member of the queer community myself, that especially being in a state that has more conservative tendencies, Indiana, it's one of those situations where not everyone feels comfortable going to a talk, going to a restaurant and everyone sharing about their opposite sex spouses, and then they talk about their same sex or their non-binary partner. That can be a moment of, what do I do? That's why I said, if you feel safe, if you feel welcome, definitely follow that advice. But I want to say it's valid if you don't feel safe. And that's where I'd say work with your faculty and staff, trusted people in your identity communities, whether it's part of an international group you're a part of an LGBTQ plus group, a Black scientist group, Latina group, and find ways to find the safety you need and make the connections that you need to move forward.
Can I pick up on that, Edward?
Yeah,
so thank you, Lauren. And speaking of safe spaces, I hope that you all feel that way about today, right? So I would challenge you to try to, as you're sitting at your tables even, just introduce yourself to one person you don't know. I think if you're sitting alone, then I would definitely try to maybe during a break, as you're getting coffee, as you're talking about this session, just introduce yourself to one person you don't know, because it's the small steps that you can take, the incremental steps will help you to feel more confident when you're in a safe situation like this, because I don't believe anyone is here to hire you. So unless these guys are hiring. So I hope that you feel comfortable doing that.
I'll add a little bit on that. I totally agree about the safe zone. The reason we started our nonprofit organization to create that safe zone for the international postdoc and PhD students. We realized that it's extremely difficult to do networking when you are culturally different, your language barrier and everything. So we gathered people who are of the same identity. We started talking within the group, created that safe zone, and from there we exponentially grew and created the network. So it doesn't have to be your safe zone within your community or within your identity. It can be within your lab, within your department, within your friends group. Having familiar faces in a room, getting to know familiar faces, networking with alumni, networking with your PI, their alumni, it's really helpful. Grow with the known connection, then expand to unknown.
That's some fantastic advice. And actually, I really want to kind of touch a little bit more on what Arnav and Melanie have brought up here. I think in some cases, especially when you're coming from an academic setting and you're used to being in classrooms and things like that, a lot of times we find it easier to talk with our peers, right? Those are other students, other trainees. It's more comfortable. But then when it comes to actually talking to an employer or someone who's at a higher level, suddenly it starts to feel a little bit more nervous. So not that you should be, but I guess kind of the question that I really want to delve in on there is, what are the differences when, say, if you're talking to a friend or a peer that you're sitting with in class versus you're actually now sitting with an employer? Do you treat it the same way? Do you treat it a little bit differently? How would you recommend approaching that, especially if you're not used to that?
So all of us code switch in different ways in our lives, right? And we all talk about our research a different way to a colleague in our research group versus our parents when we go home for a holiday, right? Mm-hmm. And so in the same way that you're going to talk about your research differently to those different audiences, you need to code switch again. And you also need to think about the context, of course, right? If this is a person who could potentially hire you, what are they listening for in that conversation? Right? They're listening for someone who can present themselves professionally, communicate effectively, and potentially somebody that they would like to work with. And I'll put in a shameless plug for my workshop on pitching yourself. Come to that if you want to get some practice doing that.
So I'll add a little bit on that, because I totally agree. When you were talking about your science, I always keep 3 versions of my work. So since I now work with the immuno-oncology field, so when I'm talking with someone who is experienced immunologist, I have a version ready, 35 seconds to 1 minute, which I can talk detail about technical details and everything. So that generally happens with my peers who are in the fellow scientists or others who will understand exactly what I'm talking. I have a second version with a lot of real world implications. Like I work with therapeutics, which actually helps dying cancer patients. So I can tell about that story to someone who has little bit understanding of the biology and everything, but not exactly knows the immunology part. And finally, I also have a very generic version when I'm talking to my parent or my friends who are totally from different field. I have a version which actually talks about the patients, their unmet needs, and how, as a scientist, we are trying to help them. So we, as I said, we have switches. We can switch to different modes when talking to a peer and also a potential employer. Your potential employer may not be from exactly the same field. We always try to go and look for opportunities in different directions. So you have to prepare your pitch in 3 different ways. And first and foremost, you have to understand and you have to study your audience. Like, I'm here, I'm studying you all. When I'm talking to someone, before talking to them, I would know that exactly whom I am going to talk, what's their background, and little bit knowledge you should have, and you should frame yourself accordingly. Thank you.
So, shorter answer than I've given to other questions. I want to give more of a piece of advice, something that I've seen, especially among the biomedical science trainees I've worked with, that's been almost transformational, is I've seen people really come in concerned about networking, and then they get involved in our science outreach groups. Our science outreach, our science education. We have a number of efforts at our school of medicine around doing science outreach to K-12 schools, to high school students. Having started my career as a high school teacher, nothing will get you over your fears and concerns of talking about something like talking to high school students. But also doing outreach to the community. There was an effort around COVID vaccine distribution to help educate people about the science behind vaccines. So that's more of a tip or trick. If you want to grow in some of your skills, outreach is a good way during your training to do some of that.
So I guess kind of to jump into a little bit of a different direction here. We've been talking a lot about kind of those personal skills, how to approach this from an individual standpoint. I think it's worth recognizing, again, I think this was briefly touched on by Arnab, but in the past few years we saw a lot of changes. The way that things worked before COVID, during COVID, and after COVID are all different. And obviously the advice that we would have for how to network during COVID versus now is different. So I guess the real question is, how has it really changed? What are we seeing now in terms of how networking is taking place? We can kind of think about the online versus offline component, but as these trainees who are getting, maybe just starting their student careers, or maybe they're getting ready to go into that next job, what should they be prepared for?
I think you all know this, and you all have done this, but being ready to present yourself online in a professional manner. I actually applied for a job where in the second round, I had a day's worth of interviews from 9 to 4, and it was totally on Zoom. So it was exhausting, but I met with different people every half hour or so, and then I also had to give a presentation online. That was fairly recent. It was in the last year. So I think employers at this point are much more likely to do maybe a first round interview on Zoom. So being ready to present yourself in that way is really meaningful. I think it is hard. I think it's harder to interact with people over Zoom. I think it's harder to pick up on cues when people are talking and when you're trying to present yourself and your work. But I've seen a real movement towards more online interviewing rather than less.
I think I see a much higher reliance on LinkedIn in interesting ways too. I feel like in some ways LinkedIn is turning into Facebook. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. So I think knowing how to send an invitation to someone on LinkedIn is incredibly important, and not relying on the generic, I'd like to add you to my network, but really being able to tailor why you want to know them. I think also knowing what to post on LinkedIn, which is, it's weird now. So I would keep LinkedIn professional, not Facebook-y. That would probably be my recommendation. But there's also these kind of humble self-promotion things happening on LinkedIn. And I think actually the best way to engage on social media professionally is to uplift your colleagues and to really amplify good work that's being done that you may or may not have had anything to do with, but really finding ways to kind of promote others communicates a lot to people about who you are, more so than being hyper like self promotion-y. That's not a word. But I guess that's how because there's such a high reliance on your virtual presence right now, and I think that's my number one tip.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I would say I do feel like we have a lot of opportunities in online self-documentation, networking, and so forth. But for me, I also see it as it does increase some of the challenge because now you have a LinkedIn profile. There are some employers, unless there are laws in specific states against it, some employers will look at your public social media posts. There's that, but then there's also things as simple as, is my resume consistent with my CV, consistent with my ORCID profile, consistent with my LinkedIn, consistent with my ResearchGate, consistent with everything? And it does add an additional load of how do I make sure everything's updated? 2 weeks ago, I spent the better part of a Saturday going through making sure my LinkedIn Scholar and ORCID were up to date, and they're still not up to date.
So a couple of things to build on what my colleagues have shared as terrific, wise advice. I do feel like, to echo what Annie was saying, LinkedIn is changing. It's to some extent moving into that space that Twitter has vacated because people don't feel safe on Twitter for a lot of reasons at the moment.
X.
Okay. Yeah, I refuse to use that nonsense. Anyway, but that can be good because if you didn't feel comfortable knowing how to post on Twitter, because there are kind of unwritten rules about how to be effective on Twitter, I think LinkedIn can be easier to get the hang of and participate in the conversation. And so that can be an open door to you. Also, Microsoft, which owns LinkedIn, pays a lot of money for your LinkedIn result to be among the top Google results when somebody searches for you. So it's definitely worth your while to do the work that Lauren was describing in keeping it updated, because as soon as you're going to go try to meet someone, and by meet, that can be in humanity, real life, or online over Zoom, right? They're going to look you up, and LinkedIn is likely to be something that greets them. So make sure there's something useful about you there. And I wouldn't kill yourself over making sure everything is aligned. Have something useful there to meet them so they can learn a little bit about you for the conversation. And then the last thing I would say is, I think we've been talking about networking, and I think when we think about networking, we think about big events, lots of people, like this room, right? And often the best kind of networking can be informational interviews, which are just a one-on-one conversation with a professional about their career, their career path, and their organization. How did they get to where they are? What do they like about what they do? What advice do they have for you on how you could follow that path too? Having those conversations one-on-one over Zoom, which is much better now and much more of a convention. They used to take place over the phone. I think is a really great opportunity coming out of the pandemic, an opportunity to connect with people one-on-one. It's likely to be a space where you might feel a little bit more comfortable than at a huge event. And you can learn so much from those conversations. You can learn what kind of organization appeals to you and what kind of organization is a big old thumbs down. This is going to save you a lot of time.
And in terms of reaching out to people and having informational interviews, as I mentioned earlier, I recently reached out to some total strangers who have PhDs in the biomedical sciences and invited them to serve as panelists on Zoom for my class on careers for life scientists. And all of the people that I contacted, this was good luck, said that they were willing to participate because it's over Zoom, it's more convenient, they're in different states, but they all also said, thank you so much for contacting me. I wish someone had done this kind of work when I was getting my PhD. So I don't know if my colleagues would agree with that, but so many people are willing to talk with you and share information about their jobs, about their path, about how they got into a particular field. So don't hesitate to contact people. And because we've been talking so much about LinkedIn, I wanted to know, how many of you have a LinkedIn profile? Great, good, awesome. And I don't know if you've noticed, but another big change that I've seen over time is just employers posting jobs on LinkedIn much more frequently. So I don't know if you've seen that change as well, but we all have seen it for sure.
I'll just add few things, building on to all my colleagues. Yes, things have changed. Everything is becoming online. Past 3 years, I might have given 30 plus interviews in the different stage, final stage. Not a single one I had to visit on site. I had between 2 jobs, I had more than 10 job offers. Not a single one I had to go meet in person. Everything is becoming virtual. There is good and bad. There is bad is that you are losing that emotional connection to the person who is sitting next to you and talking to them. But good thing is that the reach is increasing. Now I can get into informational interviews with lot more people when I request on LinkedIn. That was not possible because how many people you will meet in person other than conferences? But now you're from home or in your university, in your office, you can get to talk a lot more people. Another there are a lot of bad thing about LinkedIn, about it's becoming Facebooky, but good thing about LinkedIn is that it has the amazing resources that who works for that company, which all of your alumni are present in that particular employer. They have that all these metrics of information already available. So I'll be going to a conference in Boston, but I would like to talk to few people. So now I have the resources. I know exactly how to reach to them, sending out a message that, okay, I would like to meet you for a coffee during the conference or after the talk. Most of the people agree. Like when Edward and Lavanya reached out to me, they reached out to me over LinkedIn and they told that this kind of conference is happening in case. I said, absolutely, I'd love to come and share my experiences. So good thing about LinkedIn and bad, there are few bad things, but mostly good as of now.
No, that's fantastic. I mean, it's definitely, we have to adjust for the times, right? And I think there are things that have gotten better, things that have certainly, have more to be desired. But, one of the things that, for example, like thinking about virtual versus on-site career fairs are a big common thing. We have them here at CASE, which, bring a lot of employers, and, those formats are different. But one of the things that we have found that with your classic kind of career format, whether it's online or whether it's in person, is that it tends to have more of an undergraduate feel. And for those that are at the undergraduate level, it's more around that sort of setup for recruiters looking for them at that level. But obviously, just about everyone that's in this room are graduate, advanced degrees, or postdocs, and going into those fairs, it can feel a little weird and not sure, what exactly you're supposed to do. And so I think a really big question is, as you're going into either, whether it be a career fair or another type session, what is really critical to be aware of that difference of when you maybe went to a career fair as an undergrad versus now going out and trying to talk to these employers as a graduate or professional trainee? What were the key differences?
I think that's a really important question. I would say, career fairs are tough because a lot of times employers will send a human resources representative who will know which jobs are open but may not know your field. So first of all, they may not be hiring at your degree level. So that's the first sort of question when you start to think about approaching employers. You can let them know about your work and your degree level, but trying to talk science with them is really a lost cause in some cases unless they send someone who is a scientist to the career fair. So I think interacting with people is tougher. with the career fairs actually at UVA, I've recently been trying to ask about this very question. So can we, or can the graduate students and postdocs attend your career fairs? And the answer is, for this huge career fair that had, I think, over 70 employers, the answer was, most of them are hiring at the undergraduate level. So of course they're welcome to come, but they should know that most of these employers are looking for bachelor's degree students. So in that situation, I would say you can still take advantage of that time. When people are on campus, if there's a consulting firm that you'd like to talk with, you can still visit. You can ask about advanced degree level hiring. They likely will have a completely different process and likely have different people involved in it, but they might be able to refer you to someone. So you can ask, is there someone else in this organization that I can connect with for advanced degree level recruiting or hiring? And they likely will know. You know what, actually we don't hire at the PhD level, or sure, and his name is, and they will give you some contact information. So I still think it's a networking opportunity, but just be ready for that if you're involved in a large organization like Cleveland Clinic or Cleveland State or CASE.
I'll add few personal experiences. I have spent several years as a postdoc in Cleveland Clinic. I had zero career fair exposure there. And what the question was exactly like, my wife was a grad student in pathology in Case Western, and when she was a grad student here, she attended career fairs probably in this thing here, and what she told me that it was totally undergrads and there was not much interest from the employers for the PhDs and stuff. I would say that now I am in a company, we hire a lot of people in the PhD level. LinkedIn is your career fair, and all the jobs and everything in the industry is posted in LinkedIn. That is that amazing place, and I don't think I was in Thermo Fisher, and now I'm in a biotech company. We never go to a career fair. But our connection starts from the local universities, like Drexel co-ops come to our university, our company, and they do their co-ops here, and from there a lot of the people get hired. So the connections grow from there. So look for opportunities that with the company you or with the industry you are looking to join. Look for their co-op opportunities, and because these are all advanced degree jobs. They are not a lot of jobs. So whenever people are going to the career fair, HR people, they generally don't look for advanced degree positions, because a lot of these positions are actually come to the companies with a lot of internal connections, a lot of networks, and so we are in a very specialized field. Things work a little differently.
So I hate career fairs, and I started one. So I started hating them because I saw all my students having these really weird experiences, right? And so I think there are a few things. So first, look at the list of employers that are coming and identify if there are any you're interested in, and then go on their websites and see if they have any positions open. Because if you're working with like an undergraduate career center, they're likely not going to have the capacity to do that work for you. But then you can really target your time if you do decide to go. The other thing I'd mention is, so we do graduate specific kind of, I don't call them career fairs, they're networking nights with beer. But we really try to, so we require that they bring an alum or somebody who's in the field, like with a PhD or a master's degree, who can speak to the work they're hiring for. And I think those are much more rich conversations because you can actually get into the science or the tech that's going on at that organization. And so that's maybe my other suggestion is don't rely on career fairs, look more to like alumni events if you want to do something in person. And then I had a third, well, I'm going to hold my third because I think Lauren wants to say something.
Oh, you could tell?
Yeah.
Like, because I wanted to say yes to what Annie's saying, but especially the first part about looking up lists. So we've had a situation on our campus where the big career fairs, 2 a year, are not only targeted to undergrads, but they're run by the Division of Undergraduate Affairs, so all the money for it is coming from the undergrad offices. But they say grad students are welcome. So my hack, and I don't know if you have what systems you have access to, but our campus uses a platform called Handshake. And Handshake is our campus, the undergrad side, uses it for campus jobs, but they also use it for career fairs and recruiting events. So what I've done, I've been developing a small cadre of grad students telling other grad students about how the undergrad office posts all of the information about career fairs and who's attending on Handshake. And to go in the Handshake and do what Annie was saying, like go down the list and Google them, LinkedIn them. I know that's not a word, but that's not a verb, but LinkedIn them and see, are they a recruiter? Oh, they're a certain large pharmaceutical company in Indianapolis is bringing there's one, but they're bringing their head of science of whatever. And then it's like, okay, I will stop by there, and to be very strategic about it. So maybe you have a hack like that.
The only other thing I want to mention is there's a big difference between open to and recruiting.
Yes.
So open to is like, sure, I guess, right? Tell me how you fit. Versus we are specifically recruiting PhDs at this level, and there is a very different recruitment arm that is working to hire those students. And so really pay attention to if they're targeting you or if they're open to, because also the way you talk about yourself will be very different. And I think that's like my last little tip.
And I would say, sorry, do you mind if I
No,
jump
absolutely.
in, Edward? And I would say, take advantage of your institution's offerings, right? So that slide of all of today's sponsors included some postdoc offices, some graduate student offices, and our field in career services for graduate students and postdocs has exploded over the past 20 years or so. And so we all are working towards the same goal, and that is to help you find jobs that are a good fit for you personally. So look at what's going on at your campus or in the clinic or any other opportunities that you have for events like this, where you can meet other people or connect with employers.
I'll quickly add one thing. There's something a lot of us do not realize as a networking event or an opportunity is, especially for biomedical PhD and postdocs, you have the vendor shows in your campus often. All these companies, all the biotech companies, or the bigger companies, when they come, they bring in application scientists. They are all PhDs or postdocs. A lot of the times we think that, okay, they are here to sell something, we'll go and grab some free lunch or free goodies, but you don't realize that this person who is standing there, he's a scientist, and it is an amazing opportunity to network with that person, get his card, get connected, talk to them. Who knows? There will be a lot of opportunities. There are hundreds of companies all around US who employ PhD-level scientists there in those application scientist positions.
Very quickly on that, I know of 2 postdocs who got jobs that way from vendors coming in. One works with Beckman Coulter, one works with Thermo Fisher. So.
And I think I'll use this time to do a shameless plug, and part of the concept behind, recognizing these sorts of difficulties, that we have when we're working with career fairs. I mean, it's not even necessarily that they're designed deliberately around this way. It's just that it's kind of the nature that we often find. And so, part of the goal, as you guys have seen, certainly we have today's and tomorrow's training sessions, to provide you with access to these experts that can assist you with developing the skills to approach these networking components. But tentatively on November 10th, now we're still finalizing the date a little bit. Everyone that's registered here is already eligible to attend, but we are working to bring in from, the variety of industry and other partners, those that are actually looking for the advanced degree students that want to hire the PhDs or the masters and such, that specifically want that type of expertise and want to meet with you guys and talk to you about that. So the goal of us having these training sessions today and tomorrow, and hopefully you can attend a lot of them, is that then you're able to then, for this networking event that we're putting together, as many as we possibly can for you all to meet with in a variety of fields, that you can then put these skills into practice there and actually be able to, sit down one-on-one, participate in these sessions where you can actually meet with those that are the ones that you're hoping to either get employed with or explore other career options. And as we're getting towards the end of our time here, I think one thing that I'll kind of transition a little bit into is, a lot of our trainees often, some that have had different careers and have maybe come back for an education or looking to make a change. How do you make a change? So you maybe started getting training in one area, but then you switch to something else, and you're trying to redevelop yourself and remarket yourself to maybe a sphere that maybe you were in the sciences and you switch to business. Maybe your business switch to science. Maybe you're in a totally other adjacent field or otherwise. What's the best way to start making those connections to make those changes?
Well, I'll jump in as the English PhD on the panel, talking to a room full of biomedical scientists and engineers. So I think in order to be successful in making that pivot, right, you need to reach out to other people who are established in that field because you need to figure it out. So in some ways, there's kind of a built-in opportunity to network. It's easy, right? That is actually how I got connected with these fine people on the panel, right, is in trying to figure out some of the changes in my own career pivot. And it gives you a reason to reach out and ask. You can say something flattering and true, like, I see you've really got this career figured out. I would love to learn from you as I try to make my own switch.
Informational interviews, that's what you need to do. Find out people, find out your alumni who have done well in that area, reach out to them and say that I think that I have a lot of interest in that area. Like, I am in a R&D scientist, but I am looking forward opportunities in the business development. So I am slowly reaching out to people who are in that, doing well, and talking to them. How is their day? How is their work? How they do it? And then try to learn. So it is about learning. Listen to them. So I don't have much to offer in the business development, but when I'm reaching out to them, I am reaching out to them for learning. So gathering as much information as possible, and then slowly, when I feel confident, I'll probably look for opportunities that way.
So I'm going to back y'all up a little bit. Before you jump into those informational interviews, really take some time to think about what you enjoy doing the most, what's important to you in your next work environment, and what kind of drives you, what your interests are. Because then I think you're able to ask the questions you need answers to make those decisions. But also, I really appreciate what you said around talking to a lot of people. Sometimes I'll hear from folks who went and met with one person and they were like, oh, I absolutely cannot go into that career. They travel 90% of the time. And I'm like, well, they work at blah, blah, blah. There are different kinds of jobs at these other organizations, right? And so getting kind of a variety of perspectives really helps you focus in on what you want to do.
Your sample size of one wouldn't fly in your science either.
Yeah, that's right.
Simple answer, agree with all of them.
The last thing I'll say is in those informational interviews, because we haven't said it explicitly, I want to make sure you know that at the end of that conversation, you say, this has been so helpful. Who are 2 other people you'd recommend I reach out to? And can I use your name when I contact them? Mm-hmm. And that's how you start and keep going.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, as we're getting down kind of to the end here, I've got a tough question maybe for you. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Maybe it's a little bit outside the scope, but it's something that we are always hearing being asked by probably anyone, to be honest, not even just necessarily our professional trainees, but you go through the networking, you get to the formal interview. A lot of times we're coming from, say, graduate student stipends or postdoc salaries, which are not as high as some of us would like, to say the least. But making that transition into industry and being ready to make the ask of having that conversation of what salary you're looking for. When is the right time when you get to that point? What's the point that you start making those asks, and how do you approach it, especially coming from not having necessarily a prior job in industry or something like that, and you're coming from a stipend?
I can jump into that because I've done a lot of that in recent years. Never ever talk about salary when in the first few rounds of the interview, because your recruiter, when they first give you the call, they will try to catch you and try to lowball you. So the political way of answering is that I know the average salary of that region for this particular position, and I'm sure that you will make the best offer to me, and I would be ready to accept if it's a reasonable offer. Just don't even give a number in the beginning. After the recruiter stage, it goes into the very much technical interviews. When we interview people, we don't even talk about salaries and everything because it's totally technical. Money part comes back towards the end when HR is ready to give you an offer, and never ever accept during the first call. How it happens is that they will call you and give you, okay, this is the X amount of money. And from postdoc to my first industry job, wow. But no, stop it. Don't say yes. Don't say yes. So he said, okay, thank you for the offer, and can you send me an email with all the details, and then I'll get back to you. Glassdoor is your friend. Go there, research, and see what is the salary range. And there are a lot of hidden things in industry. Not only the base salary, there will be bonus, there will be paid time off. There are ways to negotiate and other things. Like my last job, they couldn't increase my base salary to what I wanted, but I could negotiate a large chunk of money as a sign-on bonus. Mm-hmm. So there are a lot of ways things can be negotiated, and best way to talk to people who have successfully done that recently, and they can tell you exactly. So I actually spoke to a lot of people in my networking group, and then asked that, okay, how should I handle this situation before actually accepting the offer? Somehow it worked.
I really love that you said, I understand the range for this. Let's move on, because they will at the very beginning say, what's your number? And so another phrase that I've used is, salary is one piece of the total compensation package, which I'd love to look at as we get further along in the process. And so I think that also alerts them to there are a lot, you need to know there are a lot of things based on your values that you can negotiate. If it's time spent in the office, if it's parking, if it's, right? There are a lot of places where you can get some movement depending on the industry you go into and what's important to you. So also, don't make compensation the number one sticking point if there are other things that are more important to you, but know what you need to feel valued in an organization.
And Melanie, I just want to check, do you have to?
Yes. So I'm so sorry. I need to step out to teach that class I was telling you about, because the employer panel of the strangers is today at 11. So I'm sorry I need to leave, but I wanted to leave you with this thought. As much as we've talked about strategies and networking and trying to get in touch with people who would be willing to hire you, I want to assure you that you have so many skills that employers are looking for, and that your training and your passion and your advanced degree or postdoctoral training is really valuable in the marketplace. So there are so many employers who would be excited to have you. So I just wanted to leave you with that thought. And also, I would invite all of you to connect with me on LinkedIn. So send me an invitation. I'm totally open, and I'd love to continue to follow your careers. So thank you so much, Edward.
I'm open too, because I'm going to invite you to come and talk to my students when you've got your job.
All right. Well, I think that just about does it here. You know, let's give a round of applause for our panelists. Really thank them for their time here. I think we've got some excellent insight to get everyone's, brain really cranking to think about, these topics as we go into our concurrent sessions, which will be happening next. But before we do, what I do want to pull up for you all, and we're going to do this at the end of each of the sessions, this one included and all of our concurrent sessions, is that we will have a QR code that pops up. If you can just scan it with your phone, it's going to take you to a really short Google survey just to give your feedback of, how helpful it was, or, other questions or things like that, just because we as the CBTA want to collect that information so we can continue to promote and create, these types of events and make sure that, they're fitting your needs. So we really appreciate that. But at this time, we will actually be bringing down the barriers. And so obviously the majority of you have registered in advance and have selected the sessions of interest. So, in Ballroom C, we will be starting the CV Resume and LinkedIn one-on-one sessions. So those are 20-minute sessions. You've been provided with your time slot. So please make sure to go over there at your expected time. You're welcome to be in the other group sessions while you're waiting for that appointment slot, but make sure that you're on time, because we have tried to pack in as many of you as possible that our experts can assist with, and then for the rest of you, for our concurrent sessions that will be rotating. Pay attention to which ballroom they're in. The next ones will be, I'm going to go back quickly. Again, in Ballroom A will be the Pitch Yourself workshop. With Dr. Bostrom, and then in Ballroom B will be right here, the networking workshop with Annie Maxfield, and then again our one-on-one sessions will be in Ballroom C. So feel free to get up, stretch, make your way to which ballroom before we close the barriers, and don't worry, you can go outside the doors, and we'll be back shortly. Thanks so much.